Hello, you're right. Welcome to this lesson on the environmental impacts of plastic. So your objectives today are to, first of all, understand the environmental impacts of producing and using and disposing plastics, and give some examples of the environmental advantages and disadvantages. Now, just a question, first of all, are plastics always bad? Give it some thought. If you think, if we're looking at, say, a plastic bag over here, for example, you might think paper would be better, or even cloth. Well, if we use paper, that means we've got to chop down trees. If we used a cloth bag, that means we've got to grow cotton, and that uses a lot of water. So sometimes plastic is just one of many choices. It's not necessarily always the worst choice. The other thing to think about is food, for example. This cucumber being wrapped in plastic, well, that means it will actually last longer. And that means that the food isn't going to rot, and rotting food is actually bad for the environment. So, plastic isn't always bad. Just something to think about first of all. But there are a number of impacts. Firstly, we looked at this last time. When producing plastic, there are a number of effects. For example, firstly, when extracting oil, you can get local pollution, digging into the ground, vehicles, small oil spills, that kind of thing. Then you've got major oil spills. This can happen at sea especially, and at land, when tankers run aground and whatnot. Then you've got CO2 emissions. In every stage you have CO2 emissions and often toxic chemicals. So for example, the transporting and the processing. All of those things contribute CO2 emissions, which is also a factor in global warming, isn't it? And climate change. So these are all impacts of firstly producing plastic. What are some other environmental impacts? Another is when it's thrown away, because plastic is very durable, which means it lasts a long time. On the downside, plastic does not biodegrade easily. So as a result, plastic often ends up in landfill or the world's oceans, and here they can break down into microplastics that are consumed by animals. Now, if you can, I want you to search this video, Plastic Pollution, How Humans Are Turning the World into Plastic. This explains.
When the gods granted King Midas one wish, he wished that everything he touched would turn to gold. Midas was delighted.
Now, once you get into it, you'll see how plastics actually end up in the food chain, because when they break down, they turn into microplastics, which are eaten by fish, and then we eat the fish. So there's an environmental impact. Next slide. So what can we do? There are a few things we can do to minimise our impact. Firstly, we can recycle. To prevent oil from being extracted from the earth and processed into new plastic, we could melt down our existing plastic and recycle it. So by recycling, we don't need to extract as much oil in the first place. This also stops plastic going into landfill, which is a benefit. Another solution is the development of bioplastics. That's what you see here. These are plastics made from natural sources like sugarcane, and bioplastics usually biodegrade naturally. This means they rot away without harming the environment, which is great for disposable items like cups or forks, for example, bottles. So that can go in landfill, and it doesn't have the same impact as regular plastics. So considering all these things, I want you to answer these questions. List and describe 3 environmental impacts. Describe in detail the impact of discarding plastic. Why is recycling important? And why might bioplastics be good for the environment? Okay, so when you're doing that, you might want to stop this video, go back, and make sure you're answering in full, detailed sentences. Okay?